You know, when you're trying to learn something new, maybe like a tricky chord on the guitar or some new dance move, and you just hit a plateau.
Yeah, it's super frustrating.
Well, what if the key isn't just more practice, but actually something you do every night anyway? Sleep.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive.
Today we're digging into some really cool research that looks at exactly that, how sleep affects learning new motor skills. You know, physical stuff.
And we're basing this on a specific scientific study, so this isn't just guesswork. We've got actual data.
Right. So our mission, really, for you listening, is to unpack how sleep isn't just downtime, but actually an active part of locking in those skills. Might change how you think about practice.
Definitely. Okay, so we all kind of know practice makes perfect, yeah.
Sure, that's the standard advice.
And this study started right there. They had people do this finger tapping task.
Finger tapping, what did that involve?
It was a specific sequence, 5 keys, 4-1-3-2-4, over and over. They did like 12 trials, 30 seconds each.
Yeah.
It's a pretty standard way in neuroscience to look at learning new movements. Lets you see what the brain's doing.
Got it. And predictably, I guess, people got better just doing that initial practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone improved during that first session. Didn't matter if they trained at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m.
The improvement rate was pretty similar at first then.
Yep, pretty much the same starting boost for everyone. But that led to the real core question.
Which was?
Is it just time and repetition that leads to more improvement later? Or does your brain state, like being awake versus being asleep, actually matter more?
Okay. So time passing isn't necessarily learning time.
Exactly. So they set up some clever experiments to figure this out. Let's talk about the awake group first.
Okay, what happened when people trained and then just stayed awake all day?
Right, so one group trained in the morning, then they got retested a few times throughout the day.
Did they keep improving much?
Well, they saw a little bit of improvement, slow and gradual, but honestly, it wasn't really more than you'd expect just from, doing the task again.
So no big leaps.
No big leaps, and importantly, their accuracy, the number of mistakes they made, didn't really change much either.
So the takeaway there is just being awake, going about your day, even with maybe a little more practice mixed in, doesn't automatically consolidate that motor skill in a major way.
Pretty much. Time alone while awake isn't the magic ingredient for that next level of improvement.
Okay, so this is where sleep comes in, I'm guessing.
This is exactly where it gets interesting. In another part of the study, they directly compared improvement after a day awake versus after a night of sleep.
And what did they find? Let me guess. Sleep helped.
Helped is an understatement. They found a really significant jump. We're talking around a 20% boost in speed without losing accuracy after a night's sleep.
Wow, 20% just from sleeping. No extra practice.
No extra practice needed for that particular boost, and it didn't matter if the sleep happened right after training or, say, 12 hours later after a day awake. The sleep itself was key.
That's actually pretty huge. It really points to something active happening during sleep.
Totally. And they even had a control group, to be sure.
Oh, yeah. What did they do?
These poor folks had to rest their hands during the day. Like, they literally wore mittens to stop any accidental finger practice.
Huh. Seriously. Okay, and what happened with them?
Well, they also didn't show that significant improvement during the day, and weirdly, their error rate actually went up a bit temporarily.
Huh. So it wasn't just not moving your hands during the day that stopped the improvement. It really was the lack of sleep.
Seems that way. Sleep was the catalyst for that big performance jump, whether you learned in the morning or the evening.
Okay, so sleep is crucial. We've established that. But what about sleep? Is it just any sleep or?
Good question. They wanted to know that too. So for the next step, they brought people into a sleep lab.
Full setup, electrodes and everything.
Yep, polysomnography. They monitored their brainwaves all night after an evening training session on the finger tapping task.
And they were looking for links between sleep stages and how much people improved.
Exactly. They wanted to pinpoint which part of sleep was doing the work.
Okay, moment of truth. What did they find?
The big connection, the really strong one, was with stage 2 non-REM sleep and REM sleep.
Stage 2 NREM. Okay, what about it?
The amount of stage 2 sleep people got significantly correlated with how much better they got at the task overnight. More stage 2 meant more improvement.
So it's not just total sleep time, but specifically getting enough of this stage 2 stuff.
Seems to be a major factor for this kind of skill, yes. And it got even more specific.
How so?
When they looked closer, the stage 2 sleep that happened in the last quarter of the night showed the strongest link.
The end of the night, really?
Yeah. Statistically, something like 52% of the difference in improvement between people could be explained by how much stage 2 sleep they got, especially later on. And they think it might be related to something called sleep spindles, these little bursts of brain activity you see in stage 2.
Sleep spindles.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are linked to memory.
They're thought to be involved in strengthening connections between neurons, kind of like saving the file for that new motor skill.
That
Synaptic plasticity, basically.
Fascinating. So our brains are actively rewriting themselves during stage 2 sleep, especially late in the night, to lock in movements.
That seems to be a key part of the picture for motor skills.
Now, I feel like I've heard about other types of learning, maybe like visual stuff being linked more to REM sleep or deep sleep. How does this fit?
That's a really good point. Yeah, some earlier studies, especially on visual learning, pointed towards REM or slow wave, deep sleep being important.
So why the difference here with motor skills?
The researchers suggested a couple of possibilities. One is maybe task complexity, or perhaps it's just a fundamental difference between learning sensory stuff like seeing patterns versus learning motor output like moving your fingers.
Input versus output skills needing different kinds of sleep consolidation.
Could be. Different processes might need different brain states, different sleep stages to really solidify. It's complex.
Okay, so let's bring this back to the listener. What does all this mean for, everyday life if you're learning something physical?
Well, the implications are pretty broad, actually. Think about learning a sport, playing an instrument, maybe even crafts like knitting or pottery or learning to dance.
Anything involving coordinated movement.
Pretty much. This study strongly suggests that getting a full night's sleep after you practice isn't just about feeling less tired. It's actually a critical step in the learning process itself.
So you're not just recovering, you're actively improving while you sleep.
Exactly. And this could be really important for kids, whose sleep is different anyway, or even for people recovering from injuries, like needing physical therapy to relearn movements.
It definitely shifts the perspective. Sleep isn't passive, it's active consolidation time.
That's the key message. Practice is essential, of course. You need that input. But don't discount the power of sleep to really make those skills stick and actually get better, sometimes significantly better, without you even trying while you're awake.
So if someone practices really hard in the evening, does this suggest hitting the hay sooner rather than later might be better?
The study didn't test that exact timing manipulation, but yeah, the strong link, especially with that stage 2 NREM, definitely hints that giving your brain that consolidation period relatively soon after learning could be really beneficial. Prioritizing sleep post-practice seems like a smart move based on this.
Right, makes sense. So just to wrap it up then, the big takeaway is sleep, specifically stage 2 NREM, especially later in the night, plays this really vital role in boosting motor skills learned earlier.
And it's an improvement beyond what practice alone gives you while you're awake.
So a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Knowing this, how might you maybe tweak your own practice or learning schedule to really use that power of sleep?
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what else is sleep doing? Are other kinds of learning, maybe even emotional stuff, tied to specific sleep stages in ways we're just starting to figure out?
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thinking about all that complex work our brains are doing while we're just, asleep,
Right.
solidifying everything we worked on during the day.